The following presentation is a podcast between myself, Total OS Today from the United States, and Infinitely Galactic from Australia. Now, this will be the final Tosscasts podcast for this year, 2011. On behalf of Infinitely Galactic and myself, we would like to thank you for your support regarding these podcasts. And from both of us, we would like to wish you and your family the very best, prosperous new year. Thank you. You are listening to a joint podcast between myself, Total OS Today from the United States, and Infinitely Galactic from Australia. This is Tosscast number 9, I believe, in a series of podcasts. And if you haven't already, please check out the previous podcast between myself and IG. And I will post the links, all the relevant links in the show notes below the video once we have finished. So at this time, I would like to transfer the microphone to my good friend in Australia, Infinitely Galactic.
Greetings once again, everybody who listens to these podcasts, and it's we're going to be looking at Linux Mint 12 this time around, and I mean it's a very interesting release from several different aspects, but we're going to just have a look at a few different areas of the operating system, and we're just going to be sharing our thoughts in comparison to the more or less the industry standard, of course, being Windows 7. And so it's going to be an interesting competition. As we all know, Mint 12 is a little bit different from the Mint releases that we've been used to in the past. So from that angle, it should be an interesting discussion. But I'll let Total OS today fill you guys in on what areas we're going to be discussing, and then and we'll get down to it.
Okay, basically what we did, I have a list of 10 things here, aspects of the operating system or systems in this case, in this case, but basically real brief here, we have a list of 10 starts from aesthetics down to bug software all the way down to navigation, and we'll go through these one by one and talk about it and maybe try to compare this between Linux Mint 12 and Windows 7. So first on my list would be aesthetics or looks. Now those of you who follow my channel, the first time I took a look at the GNOME or GNOME 3 when it first came out several months ago, I thought it looked kind of slick. Now a lot of you didn't like it then, and probably many of you don't like it now, but I thought at the time it wasn't quite stable, but I thought it looked slick, and I think Linux Mint 12's version of GNOME 3 looks just fine. So as far as comparing this to Windows 7, I think Windows 7 looks fine too. Something like this, an aspect of this can probably be both subjective versus objective. I completely understand that. But as far as looks, I don't want to dwell too much into the looks, except to say I think both Linux Mint 12 and Windows 7 look fine.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, the default options of both operating systems are perfectly agreeable for most people. And I mean, the thing is that most people are going to somewhat customize the way that their desktop looks anyway, even if they're on Windows 7, and with Linux Mint, you can go crazy. But we're going to talk more about that later. But yeah, by default, they both look slick, and I think they're both up to the modern standards that we're used to. So yeah, no worries there.
Okay. Let's see. Number two on my list will be gaming. I think you and I talked about this briefly last time. To be fair, I don't play any type of PC games either on Linux Mint or Windows 7. My Xbox 360 pretty much handles all my gaming and entertainment needs. But from what I gather from the community, Windows 7 right now is probably still the king when it comes to games and the quality of the games and the video quality, such as video drivers. So I will take the word or the advice of the Linux community from what I can understand when they say that for now, Windows 7 is probably the way to go if you enjoy playing games. How do you see it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for the most part, you are going to be pretty much using Windows 7 if you are a gamer, and that's really all there is to it. Having said that, a lot of the wine-based software that you can get, like Play on Linux or even Crossover, which is commercial, they do make it a lot easier to run Windows games in Linux, including Linux Mint. And I have heard a lot of success stories with those software. And honestly, if you have a very well supported video card and the drivers work quite nicely under Linux, which there are a nice list of graphics cards that are well supported. And if you get that, couple it with even a commercial solution like Crossover, you're still going to be paying less to play your games on Linux Mint than you are going to be to pay for a Windows license if you don't already have one. So from that perspective, it is possible to game under Linux, and we've talked about it before. But obviously, if games are designed to run on Windows, they're going to work best on Windows. And given a year or two of I guess development buffer, you can get those games running pretty smoothly under Linux. But yep, for the most part, if you're a gamer, you're going to be on Windows 7 anyway. So that's just the way the cookie crumbles.
Okay, yeah, just one final point on that. From my experience, uh, ATI versus NVIDIA drivers, as far as Linux, it seems like Linux seems to work better if you have an NVIDIA card versus an ATI card. Now, maybe that has changed recently, but how do you see that?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, most of the machines that I've dealt with have the ATI cards in them. As of about Ubuntu 10.04, there was native support for 3D for ATI cards out of the box. So it's not quite as accelerated as when you install the proprietary drivers, but it's more than enough if you're not a serious gamer. But before that, it was a little bit sketchy. It was a bit difficult. And since then, I actually have one machine which does have an NVIDIA card, but I had some issues with power management, and it wouldn't work with a lot of different distributions. So
Okay,
yeah, I mean I've got very limited experience with the NVIDIA side of things. On the most part, the ATIs have worked very nicely out of the box
okay,
since about Ubuntu 10.04
okay.
cycle. But I think it was around that time that the open source driver got integrated into the kernel, and so a lot of distributions now support the 3D out of the box, which is nice. I don't really do much tweaking with graphics cards at
Okay.
all nowadays.
Well, then it would seem that with gaming, your mileage may vary, I guess, depending on the machine and the type of card you have and the support for the video drivers. Does that sound about right?
Yep, that's about right.
Okay. Well, why don't you take the lead on this one if you want? Number three on my list is multimedia.
Yeah, well, multimedia is always, I mean, really at the end of the day, the system you use, especially when it comes to multimedia, is just a vehicle it's just a tool set really to get what you want to get done. So when it comes to multimedia, watching movies, listening to music, it all boils down to the applications that you have. So, the best multimedia player out there, VLC, is available on every platform. So really, I mean, from what I've heard, sometimes the high definition playback is better on Windows than it is on Linux. Having said that, that again, that boils down to the graphics drivers for each respective operating system. But again, it really just boils down to what applications you're prepared to learn to use. Obviously, things like the Adobe Creative Suite, you're going to have to use Windows. You can get them working under Wine again, but it's too messy.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, really, for me, I've found Linux as a platform to be much better for my multimedia tasks, simply because I didn't really take the time to get to learn or get attached to a particular proprietary software on the Windows side. So I pretty much learned, I got familiar with the GIMP and Kdenlive and all of these different open source programs. And so that's really become where I do my multimedia work simply because I'm familiar with them. But those who
Okay.
are familiar with, the Windows counterparts, all the Adobe software and
Yeah.
any other multimedia suites that are out there
Yeah.
on the Windows side, then it's a transition. I mean, it's the same when people move to Macs or any other system for that matter. It all depends on the
Right.
applications that you use and how familiar you are with them.
Okay. I've thought about this. I have to give the edge to Windows on this part, and you mentioned the point about HD videos. For some reason, HD videos just play better on a Windows 7, a lot more smoother. Now, I believe an argument can be said, well, the vendors aren't supplying the, drivers for the Linux side. That's why it plays better in Windows versus trying to play the Linux Mint or Ubuntu. And that's a fair argument. But just as I see it right now, I mean, as far as standard playback of normal videos, music, and all that stuff, I think both are fine, but because of the HD side of it, I would have to give the edge to Windows 7. I've
Mm.
never had an issue really in XP or Windows 7. Now, this is, of course, if you have all the appropriate, you know, codecs installed.
And
Um,
that's one thing I will
yeah,
definitely give Linux Mint a nod is that you do get more, like you get pretty much every codec and everything out of the box. If you choose to download that
yes,
version, you get it all there ready to go. With Windows, you sometimes do have to, I mean, you have to install VLC and those sort of things. But I mean, out of the box, Linux Mint is much more ready to go for the
yes,
multimedia side of things than Windows 7. But again, it's just software, so you install
right,
what you need.
right. Okay. Let's see. Number four is security. Okay. As a Windows user, I will concede this to Linux as a dual booter, between Windows and Linux Mint, Zorin, and Ubuntu. I will concede this that in terms of as being close to 100% secure as possible, Linux is best. But before I continue, if I may, let me just tell you a quick funny story. About a week ago, do you listen to the channel Quids Up? Quids or Quids Up?
Yes, I do.
Okay, he's a fine gentleman, terrific, wonderful videos. He made a video, his Ubuntu desktop, he got caught with a little virus, a little bugger, piece of malware, and I think it affected Firefox, redirecting his browser or something. And it's quite unusual for this to happen in Linux. I guess it just goes to prove that no type of operating system is perfect. So I thought I would
Mm.
have just a little bit of fun and say, I think I commented, virus? What's a virus? Laughing out loud. And then I wrote, this is ironic. Here I am, Windows 7. I've had no viruses in 2+ years I've used it, and here you are caught with with the virus or piece of malware. And it was all in good fun. He replied back, haha, funny, something to the effect, well, that's because you haven't been through any dodgy websites, mate, or maybe your PC has been infected and you just don't know it. And I forget exactly what I replied, but something like that may be true, but my PC is working and like yours is not. But uh, he managed to get it working. Whatever it was fixed. But in security in general, as a dual booter, I feel safer using Linux. I do not use any kind of, antivirus or shield in Linux. In Windows, it is required. It is necessary. Now, in the 2+ years I've been using Windows, I'm not saying I've never been attacked or something hasn't tried to get control of my system. What I'm pointing out is if you have a good antivirus shield, and there's a lot of good free ones for Windows. Let's see, there's Komodo, there's Avast, there's AVG. If you keep it up to date and maintain your Windows 7 computer, you shouldn't have any problems for most of the time. But that being said, to be honest, as far as my you know online banking and all that stuff, I feel safer using Linux. But Windows 7 can be made to be secure if you maintain it with a good virus shield. Linux to me is inherently secure. No such thing as 100%, but from my point of view, I will just say that Linux is king when it comes to security.
Yeah, yeah. And I think an interesting development coming up in that whole field with Windows is that I think Windows 8 they are thinking about shipping it with antivirus stuff already installed in it. A lot of companies are going to be ticked off about that, but
Right.
honestly, it's getting to the point now where so much of the personal information that you want to protect is actually through web browsers. So really,
Yes,
it's in the
yes.
hands of the people that develop web browsers to keep
Right.
things safe. And I think that's what happened with QuidsUp is that it was the web browser that started playing up, and
Yeah,
because
yeah.
of the fact that so many users now are not just on Windows, they're on Mac and they're on Android and they're on iOS, and it all runs through browsers
True.
and
Yeah.
basic internet browsing. So that is, I think, increasingly going to become the main sort of target. It's not so much about gaining control of machines. It's more gaining control of accounts and all the information that we put on the internet that's stored in the cloud. I think that's going to more or less be the target in the future. I
Right.
think regardless of what operating system you're using, I think yeah, caution should be taken as far as
Yes.
what sites you're visiting, what you're downloading, and that kind of thing. I mean, really, at the end of the day, if you don't stick your hand out, it's not going to get bitten. So yeah,
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah. I would have to totally agree with that. But I guess the point of this aspect here, security, there's no such thing as 100%. So, and Quiz was right. Be careful of going through, as he described it, dodgy websites. I try to avoid them like the plague. Of course, there are times where you may click something, think you're going to a valid website, and with Firefox, that red box pops up warning, this is a reported malware or phishing site or something like that. But it
yeah.
is possible to get
And then
caught.
you hit
Yeah.
that back key as fast as you're.
Yeah, right, right. You're like, oh, crapola, and go back. But okay, enough of that. Okay, number 5, I have stability. All right. Windows 7 has been out a while. Linux Mint 12 is brand new, so this may not be a fair comparison. But for the little time that I've been tinkering with it in VirtualBox, I haven't noticed any stability issues, although it will be noted that on the Linux Mint blog, it was stated that this is new, it is a work in progress, so expect issues. But if it's not, excuse me, if Linux Mint isn't 100% stable now, I have all the confidence that it will be. But from what I've seen, it appears to be stable. So at this point, I think both operating systems are just fine. I mean, if I have to give the edge to Windows 7 since it is more established, but I haven't noticed any issues. What about you?
Yep. Again, it's stable for the most part. I did have in I was running it for about 2 or 3 weeks, and I had a few GNOME shell crashes. Sometimes the GNOME shell would just lock up, and I just have to, log out and log back in again. And that's just something that they'll just have to work through in years to come. But for a 1.0, if you will,
Right.
of the new Mint experience, then I think it does okay. And I think with the next release cycle being a long-term support, I think they'll benefit a lot from the stability work that Ubuntu put into their next release. And I think Mint will definitely benefit from that. But yes, for the moment, I've been obviously running Windows 7, as a dual boot or triple boot or whatever on
Okay.
various systems for well ever since it came out. So, and yes, it's definitely a stable system, but that's what you'd come to expect from Microsoft. If you want,
Right.
they're going to take, 3 years or so to release an operating system.
Right.
They'd want to make sure it's stable. So I think
Right.
it's
Right.
fine.
Okay, sounds good. How about if you take the next one, number 6 on my list, as far as Linux Mint 12? Any bugs? Have you noticed any?
Um, Not really. I mean, again, just apart from gnome shell crashes, which I guess you could put down to a bug, but
Right.
apart from that, there's been nothing sort of strange or like at least with the default applications that are installed, they all work the way they're supposed to, and there's no kind of weird issues as far as
Right.
that's concerned. So yeah, there's nothing really to speak of there.
Okay. I didn't notice anything either, but on one of the other channels, it may have been Linux for you and me, another Australian fine person from
Yes.
Australia. I think he found the bugs when he was trying to go into the customization settings, advanced settings. When you click on and off, he says that part didn't quite work right. He found a few bugs there. I didn't notice that myself. But yeah, I think for as you say, for a 1.0, if you want to call it that release, I think Linux Mint has been pretty stable and pretty bug-free so far. But once again, let me repeat on the Linux Mint blog, they are saying this is still a work in progress. But
Mm-hmm.
eh, I,
One thing,
yeah,
yeah, one comment that I will make, the default Mint experience, obviously being Mint Gnome Shell extensions, has been fairly trouble-free. On the other hand, the Mate, the Gnome 2 fork, initially at the release candidate stage, that was working fine, and then after an update after the final release, that Mate would not work at all. And I'd log in, and the
okay,
desktop would come up, but I wouldn't get any panel, and the system monitor would be going crazy, and all sorts of other things. So the Mate desktop environment is very buggy, at least at this.
okay.
But the default Mint experience is fairly bug free. So at least in my experience.
Okay, well, as far as the bugs go, with the qualifier, I will give the edge to Windows 7 only because it's been out longer, but I trust Linux Mint will be just fine. Now, the next release, I believe, is going to be a long-term support version, right? Coming
Yeah,
up
that's
here?
correct.
Okay, so that's probably the
I
one I
think
will be.
that's going to be the
Yeah.
one that the industry I think will be comparing, because really that long-term support is going to be competing with probably Windows 8 when Windows 8 rolls out. That's probably the one that people are going to pin it to, if you will. The industry
Okay.
is going to be looking at the long-term support as the sort of the polished, stable release that
Right.
everyday people should be using.
Okay, let's move on to, well, let's see, number 7 is software, the choices of software. As far as Linux Mint goes and Linux operating-based systems in general, the one thing I've noticed when a new release comes out and you go to the repository or go to the Ubuntu Software Center and want to download one of your favorite pieces of software. In my case, it would be either like a screencasting software or at a repository and install, we'll say Kazam, which is a very lightweight screencasting software. It doesn't work in Linux Mint 12. So what I've noticed with new releases, the rest of the software out there doesn't seem to be catching up fast enough to the new new releases, whether it be Linux Mint 12, Ubuntu, or Zorin. As far as choices, there are many choices in Linux-based, types of OSs, and Windows, whether it's Windows 7 or Windows XP or Vista for that matter. There's lots of choices. There's lots of good stuff out there, and there's probably lots of junk. I will say this with Linux, there's probably more free choices in Linux versus Windows, but that doesn't always mean that they always work or that it's any good. But as a dual booter, I will give the slight edge to Windows 7 because, since Windows 7 releases are like 3 or 4 years apart, chances are if you're trying to download software that you like, one or two or three or many favorite pieces of your software, chances are it's going to work right then and there. With Linux, now maybe you've had different, experience with this. There seems to be a lag. Okay, like I just
Yes,
installed Linux Mint.
definitely,
Yeah,
definitely.
so that's how I see it. So,
Yeah, and the same story more or less here with screencasting. It took a little while to figure out because for a little while there, FFmpeg, which is what both Kazam uses as the actual tool set that it uses to record the desktop, it just puts it like nice GUI controls that you can click on. But I use the FFmpeg tool on the command line, and I couldn't. It took me a little while to figure out the how to do it because of the fact that FFmpeg wasn't working for about a week after the Ubuntu 11.10 release. and
Okay.
then it got refreshed. But in that
Okay.
time, I had to go back, compile the latest one from source. That one worked fine, and it took a
Okay.
little while for the repositories to catch up.
Okay.
But usually, the repositories that are maintained by the distribution itself, so in this case, the Linux Mint repositories and the Ubuntu repositories, for the most part, that's where you'll have the most success with applications. The ones that the operating system almost endorses, I guess. The PPAs and those are up to the developers, are up to the maintainers to keep those up to date.
All
And
right.
sometimes there will be issues. I couldn't get Kden Live working on Ubuntu 11.10 for quite a while.
Okay.
First, yeah, well, different crashes and bugs, but then they finally refreshed it and it's working fine again.
Okay.
But again, yeah, it's definitely there seems to be a bit of a lag between the
Yeah.
system coming out and applications catching up. Having said that, default selection of apps in Linux Mint 12 is far more useful than what you get out of the box on a fresh Windows 7 install.
Okay. Fair enough. Let's go on to number 8 on my list. That would be trust. Simply, I trust both Windows 7 and Linux Mint. If Linux Mint 12 isn't quite perfect or 100% now, I'm sure it will be. Of course, Windows 7 has been out a while, and for me, I've had no issues whatsoever. So, in terms of trust, I won't go any further than to say both are just fine. How do you see it?
Yes, definitely agreed. Enough said.
Okay. As far as number 9 and 10, why don't you take the lead on both of these? Number 9 is customization, number 10 is functionality or navigation. Why don't you go ahead and take the lead on customization?
Customization. Wow, where do you start? I mean,
Yeah,
really,
right.
really with Linux, most of you already know you can pretty much tailor it to however you like in most cases. Having said that, a lot of users are sort of upset with the level of customization that you cannot do in GNOME 3 and GNOME Shell unless you have it's sort of like a different way of customizing it now. Instead of simply right-clicking panels and saying add widget or add applet or something like that, now you have to install a GNOME Shell extension, then go into GNOME Tweak and enable it, and then and decide where you want to put it, and that sort of thing. So it is customizable to a point, and you can add different things to expand the functionality of it.
Right.
But I mean, looks you can still customize to your heart's content, and I'm still able to do that quite nicely in Linux Mint 12. So as far as looks are concerned, you can get much more tailored looks to your preference in Linux Mint 12 than you can in Windows 7. But having said that, Windows 7 is a very nice look and feel, as we've said
Yes.
before, and you
Yes.
can tailor that as far as just colors and different wallpapers and sounds and things like that, which is nice.
Right. Right.
But yeah, in the long run, it really depends on how far the user wants to go. The power user is going to customize the distribution to the nth degree anyway,
Right.
whereas the average user is probably just going to run with the defaults. So I think as far as ease of customization, Windows 7 is very convenient, and you right click personalize, and you can select a
Yes.
theme or download a new theme. It would be really nice if it could get to the point where we could do that in GNOME 3. It
Right.
was it was kind of at that point with GNOME 2 where you would click Appearance and you could download a new theme or you could download a new wallpaper simply from that little dialog box that popped up, which is quite nice. And you can do that in KDE as well. You can just simply
Yes.
say get new themes, get new wallpapers, etc., etc. You can't really do that in GNOME 3. It does require a little bit more mucking around
Right.
than what it used to. So hopefully they'll expand that. Hopefully the GNOME team will
Right.
expand that in the future.
Right.
But as far as level of customization, Linux wins. Ease of customization, Windows 7 wins at this stage.
You took the words right out of my mouth in terms of ease, like you said, Windows. Even though in the GNOME 3 environment, the customization options are somewhat limited or they have to be modified. But yeah, I would say for options, go with Linux. For ease, right now, go with Windows 7. So I'll leave it at that. Number 10, go ahead and get started. Go ahead and take the lead on this. This is functionality or navigation.
Yes. Obviously, everybody knows that GNOME 3 took a bit of a departure from the traditional idea of a desktop interface, which was very menu driven. You would click on a menu item and it would pop out with another menu, and you could navigate quite easily in that way. Obviously, now it is a lot more big icon based, I guess, and it's a lot more search filtered. So now I mean, both Windows 7 and GNOME Shell have very similar functionality in that you can hit the Windows key or the Meta key on your keyboard, start typing, and application results and recent file results will come up in the menu. Um, I mean, again, Windows back in 2009 when Windows 7 came out was, the sort of the next step in the evolutionary process. But I think Windows 8 is going to be a lot like GNOME Shell. So I can guess that the direction that GNOME Shell has taken is actually fairly preemptive in that they've kind of seen where the industry is going, and they are definitely stepping towards more, I guess, device friendly
Right.
interfaces. So it's
Yeah.
not really the traditional
Yeah.
desktop anymore. And even Windows 8 and Mac OS 10 is jumping on that same boat as well, sort
Right.
of converging the mobile and the tablet space into traditional desktop computing. So I mean, it's a bit of a tough competition at this stage. As far as what I feel comfortable with, Mint 12 makes it less of a transition because of the fact they have that traditional taskbar down the bottom that you can use to manage your windows
Yeah.
if you're not entirely used to the whole GNOME 3 way of doing things, which I think is well done on the Mint 12 team for taking that direction, for not just completely throwing users off the deep end.
Right.
Um, but at this stage, it's a bit of a transition, I'd say. If we were to compare Linux Mint 12 with the Windows 8 developer preview that that people are trying out at the moment,
Yeah. Yeah.
I would definitely tend to lean towards Mint 12 as ease of use. But
Yes. Yeah.
again, it's kind of a bit of a gray area. It's subjective, but at the same time, there are fundamentals which are need to be fairly objective. How simple is it to launch a web browser, to play music, that sort of thing. From that point of view, it is GNOME 3, for a person who has never used a computer before, GNOME 3 and even Ubuntu Unity are fairly idiot-proof, if you will.
Right.
And it's, pretty easy to figure out, okay, I push the mouse up here. Oh, look, big colorful icons. I click on this one, or I
Sure.
say, type whatever I would need to. But for those who are used to traditional computing, Windows 7, Windows XP, Windows Vista, it is a bit of a departure. So it depends what you're used to and how quickly you can adapt. Um, that's really my thoughts on it. So it's hard to say one
Yeah.
wins and the other doesn't,
Yeah.
because it comes down to user preference. Nowadays, I am quite used to like hitting the meta key, typing, and
Right.
pressing enter. And although I could do that on Windows 7, I just never used to. Nowadays, I am doing it on Windows 7 as well, simply because I've spent so much time doing it in Unity and GNOME Shell. And now
Right.
what I do is much more keyboard driven
Sure.
than what it
Yeah.
used to be in the past. So I mean, it's an
Yeah.
interesting sort of transition in where we are in user design and user experience at the moment. But I guess we'll see what kind of a mess we're in another, 3 years' time. And
Right. I debated about this one. Right now, if we were to compare, say, Linux Mint 11 and 12, right now, for now, I feel more comfortable with Linux Mint 11.
yes,
For now, because obviously I've been using it such a long time. With Linux Mint 12 versus Windows 7, this can be subjective. Since Windows 7 has been out longer, I would give the edge to Windows 7. But like you said, it's not that difficult to navigate through Linux Mint 12. Um, I mean, they're they're trying to make the transition as easy as possible, as you said, and I think trying to combine GNOME 2 and GNOME 3. For those who can't quite get into GNOME 3 or force their minds to move on into the future, as I like to say. I think Linux Mint is trying to make the transition, as you said, as easy as possible. I didn't have any problems navigating. it does take some getting used to versus Linux Mint 11. But like you said, Windows 8 is going to be completely different also. But I will say this, comparing Linux Mint 12 to Windows 8, as I see it right now, I think I would take Linux Mint 12 right now. Now, 6 months from now, a year from now, I really don't know. And one more thing, with Unity, I caught on with Unity almost immediately. I'm not really sure why. I know when it was released, a lot of people in Linux community just hated it, but for some reason I fell in love with Unity almost immediately. With Linux Mint 12, I like what I see, but I'm not quite there yet. Maybe I will be. Now with Unity, I installed it in my multimedia laptop, and it's still in there. Linux Mint 12, I think I will wait because it seems more of a radical change or more of a learning process to get used to what I see in Linux Mint 12. But that being said, as far as navigating or learning to navigate through Linux Mint 12 as it is, it shouldn't be that much of a problem, even for, say, die-hard Windows users. So there you go.
Yeah, that's right. And I share your thoughts as well about, the first impression, the first feel of using Linux Mint 12 as opposed to, Ubuntu Unity. I had the same thing. It was like the first time the Ubuntu Unity came out, I was like, I can see how this is useful. It's not quite mature yet, so I feel like it's a bit limited. I feel like it's a bit of a child as far as a user experience is concerned, but I can see where it's useful. By the time 11.10 came around and Unity was much more refined, I was like, now this is something I could work with. And I think that was the opinion of a lot of Linux users, those that really bagged on Unity when it first came out.
Right.
They second time round they said, "Oh no, wait a second, no, I'm starting to see where this is going now. Yeah, no, this could make sense." Whereas, yeah, I think just being caught in that middle ground where Mint is at the moment, trying not to
Right.
offend their user base, but at the same time they have to move
Yeah.
forward. It's yeah, there's just a bit of not identity crisis, but something similar.
Well, look, there was an updated blog on Linux Mint 12, I think from Clem. I believe his name is Clem, who was the founder of Linux Mint, and he says, you know what? Something to the effect, I'm just paraphrasing, I mean, they're saying that they had no choice but to move into the future. And, GNOME 3 is it for better or for worse. And I know they're trying to, try to ease the transition with the MGSC, the Mint GNOME shell extension. I hope I got it right. And also trying to incorporate it with Mate, which is a good idea. But, I see their point. They had no choice. They had to move forward. And Linux Mint 12, you know, may take some getting used to. I mean, for me, it will, versus say Unity, where I just fell in love almost immediately. But I can see their point, and I have no reason to believe in the next release, which will be a long-term, service. I think it'll be just fine. But for now, right now, for a dual booter, I'm starting to get used to it, but I'm not quite there yet. I think I will be once I get more comfortable and once all my favorite pieces of software, blend in and work well with Linux Mint 12. I probably will do it as a dual boot install and just go from Linux Mint 11 to 12. I'm not quite there yet. Not to take anything away from what Linux Mint 12 is trying to accomplish. I guess what I'm trying to say is for folks out there who have Linux Mint 12 and it works perfect, keep it. If you like using Unity, keep it. And for that matter, if you prefer to keep Windows 7 and nothing else, I guess that's okay too. But if you're thinking about dual booting and if you are new to Linux, for other folks out there, I would recommend either Unity or Linux Mint 11. So,
Yeah, and I would mirror similar thoughts there. I mean, as far as where I'm at, as as a sort of a power user, but I don't really like to go too crazy with changing the desktop that much.
right.
I'm back with Unity again. So
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
using Ubuntu 11.10
Okay.
with Unity, and it's working quite nicely for me. I'm getting work done, and things are efficient, so I'm not complaining. But I did use Mint 12 with Gnome Shell for a number of weeks, and I just at this stage I feel more comfortable. It's more coherent. with Unity, and for that matter with Windows 7 than where Mint is at the moment. But I have all good faith in the Mint team that they can improve it. They will get better, and I guess it really only goes up from here.
Yes.
So it'll be good to see what they have by the time the long-term support release comes out, because really the users that have been using Linux Mint 9, which is probably one of the more viable solutions for those looking for a fallback, which was the previous long-term support. Uh, those users will need to make they'll need to make sure that those users who have been using long-term support will feel comfortable in the next long-term support. So it'll be interesting to see where
Right.
Mint goes from here. But there's always Linux Mint Debian, which
Yeah, well,
which is
yeah, that's not for me, but okay. Um, Yeah, I would have to agree with what you said. If you don't like Linux Mint 12 now or not quite there, give it time. I mean, it is what it is. It's the future of Linux Mint, at least Linux, for the folks at Linux Mint. And I think with the next release, the long-term support release, I think I will feel more comfortable, and that's when I would probably do it as a full install or at least a dual boot install alongside Windows 7. So, you know don't say, Linux Mint 12 sucks because they changed it. Well, no, it doesn't suck. It's different. It's a change. It takes some getting used to. And unless for some reason your install of Linux Mint 12 totally crashes every time you try to boot it up, in my opinion, it does not suck. And that's me coming from a Windows dual booter.
And
So,
at the end of the day, you've just got to look at it from I mean, the people that are the teams that are trying to make these operating systems are working incredibly hard to try and make it as best as they humanly can. I mean, there are operating systems out there which aren't aimed at pleasing the community, and I'm not going to mention names at this stage, but the distributions like Linux Mint are community driven, and that's their focus. And I think as long as they keep the community that is supporting them, as long as they keep them as the
right.
focus of their development, I think in the end they're going to come out all right.
Yeah, I would totally agree. So, give Linux Mint 12 a try if you're a seasoned Linux user. I would say definitely go ahead. If you're brand new, if you want to give it a try, don't install it as a replacement yet for Windows. Try it in a virtual environment, or even something we should have mentioned. Try installing it or trying to boot off a USB stick. That's another safe way of trying Linux Mint 12 or any Linux for that matter. That way you won't have any issues in terms of crashing your Windows install if something goes wrong. But once again, if you don't like Linux Mint 12 now, I think you will. Give it a try if you so choose to. As far as comparing it to Windows 7, I think we did our best trying to be fair. Um, I still will stick with Windows 7 as the standard, for me at least, but I expect nothing but good things from the folks at Linux Mint. So, at this point, though, we can probably conclude this podcast. What say you?
Yeah, definitely. Here. That's my thoughts exactly. And yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to what the Mint team have for the community in the future. But at this stage, yeah, I mean, Windows 7 is mature, and I guess we'll be comparing, everything with Windows 8 when it rolls out. And I think that will be an interesting comparison.
Yeah, that'll be another podcast, I'm sure, or many podcasts with the new Windows 8 just to see what happens next year. If I had to guess, it'll probably be another love-hate relationship with Windows 8 as it was and is, I suppose, still with Ubuntu, Unity, and Linux Mint 12. Okay,
The interesting thing from that
so,
perspective is that both Ubuntu and Linux Mint will have matured quite a bit by the time Windows 8
right.
comes out.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it'll be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I tested the Windows 8 developer version. I have to be honest, as much as I like Windows 7 or Windows in general, it took some while to get used to it. Granted, it was just a sneak preview. It wasn't quite polished, but I'm curious to see where they go with this. And I think Windows or Microsoft said there will be one Windows 8 version across the board, whether it be for tablets, smartphones, or PCs. I'm curious to see how they're going to handle that, but that's for another topic altogether. All right, this point, I want to say thank you from the United States, from Total OS Today. Thank you for listening to all these Tosscasts podcasts. As always, send in your comments and suggestions if you have any. We're always looking for new topics, and if you have any questions, let us know. We haven't really answered any questions lately. I don't think we did the last time. So if you have a question, some kind of a support question, whether with the Windows or Linux, one of us will probably have an answer for you. So from the United States, I am signing off, and from Australia,
I am going to be signing off as well. Feel free to leave comments wherever it is convenient, and yeah, let us know what features, what kind of functionality you want to see back in Mint 12. For me, it's definitely the Mint menu. If I was going to use Linux Mint for any period of time, I loved that menu, and it's certainly sorely missed in Mint 12. But just as an example, but if there's other features that you like about Mint that you want to see in future releases, then yeah, definitely let us know in the comments, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see what kind of list we can compile. So thank you once again, everybody, for listening, and I shall sign off as well.
thank you to all, and we will catch you sometime in the future. Ciao.